Hello and welcome back to another video. I'm Zelp and today we're going to look at some Warframe, and what I'm about to do today is tedious, but I also feel like it's going to be kind of useful. However, it may be subjected to change in the near future. We really don't know. We are going to try and find out in this video what exactly is the armor skilling. So currently information provided is that the armor, shield, and health scales exponentially before, but currently it scales in a S curve. And for those that do not know, an exponential curve looks something like this, and an S curve looks something like this. So with an S curve, this kind of means that the armor does not increase that much in early games when you are still new. And then in the mid game it actually grows a lot, but at the really late game it kind of slows down again. Now if you head over to wiki and look for armor scaling on enemies, you'll find that they give you this formula, which is the old formula. So this graph has not been revised. As you can see, it's an exponential growth. It also actually states down here that standardized armor scaling prior to the new update, so it's basically saying that it's outdated. And after trying to find anything related to armor in the other few recent patch notes, I could not find anything regarding this issue, so we don't actually have any info on how the armor is being scaled currently. And in my last video I said something that I want to find out more about how we can compare between corrosive and also viral, which one is actually better, things like that. But I cannot do that if I don't know how the enemy armor is being scaled, because that way we won't really know if corrosive will eventually be better than viral, or is viral just the current meta. I do want to point out that my information that I've checked is really just on the patch notes and also wiki. So if there is some other sources of information that you have found, maybe in the forums that you guys have gathered, a formula that they have released, which I'm not aware of, please let me know down in the comments, because I would really like to see it. So what we are basically going to do today is we are going to plot or find out what the enemy armor scaling is currently. And the way we do this is going to be somewhat manual. It's going to be very tedious, but I guess someone has to do it. What I am planning to do is that for every 5 level of the enemy, I will summon in the simulacrum, and then we are going to deal damage to it to see how much damage we get out of it. And based on the damage reduction, we can actually then backtrack and calculate the armor that it has. Now, according to the patch notes at least, armor did not change. The damage reduction is still equal to the current armor divided by current armor plus 300. So by using this formula, if we could find out the ratio of the damage reduction, we can actually find the current armor. And with that current armor, we can plot a graph between the base level of the enemy, because we are the one summoning it, and then versus its current armor, and we can see how it actually looks like. Maybe even come up with some kind of formula that fits the graph. So basically over here I've prepared it. We have the enemies, the damage that we're gonna see when we attack those enemies, then we can calculate the damage reduction based on the actual damage that the weapon has and how much damage it actually deals to the enemy. And then from the damage reduction, using this formula, we can find its current armor, and with the current armor and the enemy level, we can roughly plot a graph. Now I actually want this to be as detailed or as refined as possible, but doing every single level from level 1 to my highest current that I could summon in the simulacrum is 160. It's just going to be too long, so I have divided them by 5. So we're going to do for every 5 levels instead, and roughly get a curve from there. Now a few things to note when doing this experiment. First, we have a control, which is a charger. What I basically did was I used my shaku, which is the weapon that I'll be using. This is the shaku, and if you come over here, you can see that it is unmodded. It only has reach because I don't want to miss so much. And if you look at the impact, it only has impact damage, which is 180. And the whole reason for even picking the shaku is because he has only one damage type. Impact is not very significant. Sadly, it does deal a slightly lower damage because there is a health damage multiplier a negative health damage multiplier on a Lancer that we will actually be using for our test. So more on that in just a bit. Now we're going to use the Shaku because it only has impact, and what we're going to do is we're going to try it on a charger, which is our control. Now the idea here is to see if there is any other external damage that is unpredictable. So what I'll usually do is I get a control, I will attack it and see the damage. Now just now we saw there was 180, but when I attack him we see 90, right? 90 damage coming out everywhere. So the reason for that is because of the stance. So the Shaku is a really quick weapon, and the stance that you put on is this one, Atlantis Vulcan, and it actually does 50% of the damage 5 times on the first hit. So this means that 50% out of 180 is going to be 90, so therefore my reading is accurate. And also another thing to note is that there are no impact, negative damage multiplier on charger. So everything is good in this sense. Now the next thing that we're going to look at is the Lancers. So sadly for Lancer, the clone flash actually has a negative 25% on impact damage. This means that whatever damage that we end up getting, we'll actually need to top that up by an extra 25% to find its original, so that it does not include the damage reduction from the damage multiplier, if that makes sense. Now if you are a OG here on my channel, you know that we always use the heavy gunners for testing, but this time we changed. The reason why is because a heavy gunner does not exist below level 1. You won't actually see any heavy gunners that is below level 5. So that's the reason why I took the Lancer, because the Lancer does have one that is from level 1 onwards. His base level starts at level 1. Therefore hopefully it's going to give us a more accurate reading. Also the heavy gunner has so much armor. He has a base armor of 500. By the time it scales all the way to 160, the damage value might actually be too small to be clearly identified. If it's 1 at a level, let's say 150, it might still be 1 damage at level 160. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. I do not want to put in things like pressure points and stuff, although that is going to bump up the damage, and when you have larger damage you will actually get a more accurate reading. The problem is, by adding other damage multipliers, I'm afraid that it will actually make the calculation a little bit more messy, and it kind of gives us more room for mistakes as well. So I'm trying to avoid that. So I feel like the Lancer is actually a really good candidate. Okay, now enough talking, let's start. Now while running back and forth collecting information on the damage value for our graph, I also realized that if I want to compare it with the original weapon damage, which is 180 impact damage, there are actually a few other steps that I need to do. One is that the damage that we see is reduced due to the health multiplier that the Lancer has. Remember we said that the Lancer has a sort of like a resistance to impact by 25%. So its original damage is already reduced by 25%. So when you think about it, you can't just increase the value that we see by 25%, because let's say it does 100 damage. If it's reduced by 25%, it becomes 75 damage. But I can't take 75 damage and increase it by 25% to get back 100. So what I need to do is actually I need to divide that 75 damage by 75%. So therefore, after getting all the values, I actually added another column which states before DM, which stands for damage multiplier, or you can put like health multiplier as well for the Lancer. And then basically what I did there is every single value that I see that is recorded is divided by 0.75. Now the next step is that we need to think about the stance. So the stance actually reduced our damage by 50%, so we have to bump that up to 100. Therefore we times 2, and therefore I added another column which states before stance, and I multiply those value that is before DM by 2. And now we have something that we can compare with our original base damage from the Shaku. To find the damage reduction, really just trying to find a percentage, a ratio between the damage that you see and the original damage that you could produce. So you need to find out how much damage is missing by taking the original damage minus the damage that you see and then divide by the original damage, and that will give you a ratio, which is the damage reduction. The next step is really easy. Follow the formula damage reduction equals to armor divided by armor plus 300, and we just pretty much play that around to get damage reduction times 300 divided by 1 minus damage reduction equals to armor. And then using that formula, we find the current armor. Now finally, all there is really just to key in the values into the system and plot a graph. So based on the information gathered, we can actually plot it out and it looks something like this. And it is a S-curve. So basically, it starts off slow and then it gets faster, and then after that the growth kind of slows down again. And from what I can see, it kind of speeds up between level 40 to around level 100. Now the few regrets that I kind of have is that my damage output is not big enough, so if only I can increase my damage even further, I would get nicer values so that I don't have these like repeating values which will kind of make these flat surfaces, because otherwise it should get somewhat of a smooth upwards and downwards curve. Now the other thing that we can probably do to make it look nicer is to use a butcher instead of a lancer, because they have lower base armor, and also to increase the interval. So instead of doing from 0 to 5 to 10 to 15 and so on, we can actually do 1, 2, 3, 4 for each enemy level. Now in respect to what we have experienced before, a level 55 lancer, which is the first training point that we actually receive, has about an armor of 1950. But if you were to look at the old calculation, you can see that at level 150, a lancer actually has 3.4k armor. So there's a huge drop in terms of armor for the new system in relative to the way it was before the update. However, if you look at the damage reduction at 92%, this one will actually give you an 86%. So the difference in terms of damage reduced is only about 6%. Now coming up with a formula to justify this curve in a weird way to kind of describe their current armor scaling is going to be tougher and it's going to take more time. So let me know down in the comments if you guys want to see that. Now I'll leave it up to you guys. If enough people comment that they want to see my version of describing their current armor scaling formula, so that maybe in the future you can actually compare and see how accurate it is. If not enough people care enough to know their current armor scaling formula, we might as well just wait for them to release that formula, and it kind of saves me a lot of time. So what does this mean for corrosive, and is viral really the new king? I guess we'll have to find out in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe.